Rohan was a young boy who lived in a small village surrounded by green hills and flowing rivers. He was kind and cheerful, always running around with his friends, playing by the river, and chasing butterflies in the fields. However, Rohan was also careless and never took his responsibilities seriously. His father, a hard-working farmer, often asked him to help in the fields, but Rohan always found a way to escape. He would pretend to be tired or say he had something more important to do. But in reality, he simply did not want to work. The villagers often reminded him that every person had a role to play in keeping the village thriving, but he would only nod and forget their words the next moment. He believed that the village would always have enough food and water, and there was no need to worry. While the other children sometimes helped their parents, Rohan spent his time enjoying the cool shade of trees or playing near the riverbanks. Even when his mother asked him to run small errands, he would delay them or leave them unfinished. He never realized that one day his carefree attitude would lead to serious consequences. One summer, the village faced an unexpected crisis. The sun burned hotter than ever, and the usual rains never came. The river that once flowed abundantly began to shrink, and soon the fields started to dry up. The crops, which were the villagers' main source of food and income, began to wither under the scorching heat. The elders of the village gathered and discussed what could be done to save their land from disaster. After much thought, they decided that the only solution was to dig a canal from the mountain stream to bring water to the fields. It was a difficult task, requiring the effort of every able person in the village. Rohan's father, like many others, took up his tools and started digging. He urged Rohan to join in and contribute to saving their home. However, Rohan, as always, was uninterested. He found the task too tiring and boring. Instead of helping, he spent his time wandering near the river, hoping the water would return on its own. He ignored the warnings of the villagers, believing that somehow everything would be fine. Little did he know that his carelessness would soon teach him a lesson he would never forget. Days passed, and the situation in the village grew worse. The fields, once green and full of life, had turned brown and barren. The villagers struggled to find enough food, and the few crops that had survived were not enough to feed everyone. The river had almost dried up, leaving behind only small puddles of muddy water. Despite this, Rohan still did not understand the seriousness of the problem. He continued to avoid work, believing that things would soon return to normal. One evening, as he returned home, he saw his mother lying weak on her bed. She had fallen ill due to hunger and exhaustion. His father looked worried, telling Rohan that they needed fresh vegetables to make her soup, but there were none left. Desperate, Rohan rushed to the village market, hoping to find food, but the stalls were empty. The farmers had nothing to sell because their crops had died without water. It was at that moment that Rohan realized his mistake. If he had helped dig the canal, the fields would have received water, and there would be food for his family and the village. Guilt filled his heart as he hurried back home, determined to make things right. Rohan could not bear the thought of his mother suffering because of his carelessness. Without wasting another moment, he gathered his friends and told them they needed to help the villagers dig the canal. At first, some hesitated, but seeing the determination in Rohan's eyes, they agreed. With shovels and buckets, they went to the dry fields where the villagers had been working tirelessly. The elders were surprised to see Rohan there, but when they realized he was ready to work, they welcomed him without hesitation. For days, Rohan and the others dug under the scorching sun, their hands blistered and covered in dirt. Each night, he returned home exhausted, but he no longer cared about playing or running by the river. His only goal was to bring water to the village and save the people he had ignored before. Slowly, the canal began to take shape, stretching from the distant mountain stream to the thirsty fields. Finally, after weeks of effort, water flowed through the canal, reaching the dry land. The villagers cheered as they saw their fields come back to life. Rohan felt something he had never felt before: pride in helping his village. As days passed, the once dry fields turned green again, and crops began to grow. The village, which had been on the brink of disaster, was now full of life. The villagers rejoiced, knowing their hard work had saved them from hunger and hardship. Rohan watched as people smiled and gathered food without worry. For the first time, he understood the importance of responsibility. His father placed a hand on his shoulder, proud of the change in his son. Rohan no longer saw work as a burden, but as a duty to his family and community. He continued helping in the fields, making sure the water from the canal reached every part of the land. The elders praised him, and the children who once played with him now looked up to him with admiration. His mother, recovering from her illness, smiled warmly at him, knowing he had grown into a responsible young man. Rohan never forgot the lesson he had learned. He realized that no village could thrive unless everyone played their part. From that day on, he worked alongside his people, knowing that even the smallest efforts could make the biggest difference.